I never wanted to work night shift at Cedar Valley Medical Center, but as a first-year nurse, I didn't have much choice. The hospital was chronically understaffed, especially on the geriatric ward where I was assigned. Most nights it was just me and one other nurse, Maria, covering 30 patients across 2 wings. The ward itself was exactly what you'd expect: long fluorescent-lit hallways, the constant beeping of monitors, and that unmistakable hospital smell. But something about the place felt wrong after midnight. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence heavier. It started about 2 months into my rotation. I was doing my 2 a.m. rounds when I noticed a figure standing at the end of the east wing hallway. It looked like an elderly man in a hospital gown, which wasn't unusual. Patients sometimes got confused and wandered at night. But something about the way he was standing, perfectly still, facing the wall, made my skin crawl. "Sir," I called out, "you shouldn't be out of bed. Let me help you back to your room." He didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe. I walked closer, my footsteps echoing off the linoleum. When I was about 20 feet away, he slowly turned his head. Not his body, just his head. A full 180 degrees to look at me. His face was wrong somehow, like someone had tried to draw a human face but gotten all the proportions slightly off. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the distant beeping of monitors. The figure's mouth stretched into an impossibly wide smile, then he shuffled sideways through the wall and disappeared. I convinced myself I was just overtired. Stress and exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. But then patients started talking about him. They called him the Walker, an old man who visited their rooms at night, standing in corners, watching them sleep. Some said he whispered to them, telling them when they were going to die. The really unsettling part? They were always right. Maria didn't believe any of it until the night we both saw him. We were at the nurse's station reviewing charts when the lights at the end of the hallway started flickering. The Walker stepped out of room 437, a storage closet that had been empty for years. This time I saw his face clearly. It was like looking at a photo negative of a human face. All the features inverted and wrong. He pointed at us, that terrible smile spreading across his face, then held up 3 fingers. The next morning, 3 patients were dead. All in different rooms, all from different causes, all at exactly 3:33 a.m. I requested a transfer to day shift immediately, but the hospital was short-staffed. They made me wait 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, I kept seeing him more and more frequently. Sometimes just glimpses, a shadow moving the wrong way, a reflection in a window that shouldn't be there. But he was always smiling, always watching. The night before my last shift, I found an old photo hanging in the hospital's heritage hallway. It was from 1963, showing the original hospital staff. There he was, standing in the back row, same wrong face, same terrible smile. The caption read, "Dr. Joseph Walker, head of geriatrics, 1918 to 1963, died in hospital fire." On my final night shift, he was waiting for me as soon as I stepped onto the ward, standing at my usual nursing station, wearing that ancient white doctor's coat from the photo. As I watched, paralyzed, he slowly raised his hand and pointed behind me. I felt cold breath on my neck and heard a whispered voice. "Your turn to walk with me." I quit that night, left nursing altogether. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I'd stayed, I would have become like him. Another wrong thing walking those halls at night, smiling that impossible smile. Sometimes I drive past Cedar Valley Medical Center late at night. The geriatric ward windows are always dark now. They finally closed it last year after too many unexplained incidents. But if you look carefully at the right moment, you might see 2 figures walking the halls, both wearing white, both smiling those terrible smiles. And if you listen very carefully, you can hear them whispering names. I often wonder whose name they're saying next.
wanted my grandfather's cabin. When the lawyer called to tell me I'd inherited it, my first instinct was to sell. But something about the way my grandfather's will was written gave me pause. To my grandson James, I leave my sanctuary in the woods. Enter only when you're ready to face what waits inside. The truth needs a witness.
The cabin sat deep in the Adirondacks, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that hadn't seen maintenance in years. My grandfather disappeared there 3 months ago. The police found no body, no signs of struggle, just his journal open on the kitchen table, filled with increasingly paranoid ramblings about something he called the Winter People. I decided to spend one weekend there before listing it for sale, just to understand why this place meant so much to him, just to get closure. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered from childhood visits. The dark wood exterior had aged, but the structure seemed sound. A wraparound porch creaked under my feet as I unlocked the front door. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and something else, a sweet, metallic smell I couldn't place. The interior was exactly as the police described it. Grandfather's reading chair by the fireplace, his half-empty coffee mug still on the side table, that final journal entry about the Winter People lying open. But something was different. The walls seemed wrong. The log construction should have been straight, but the lines appeared to curve slightly, as if the walls were breathing. I blamed it on fatigue from the drive and started unpacking. The cabin had no electricity, so I worked quickly to get settled before sunset. As I was storing food in the kitchen cabinets, I noticed strange markings carved into the wood, symbols I'd never seen before, geometric patterns that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. Night fell quickly in the mountains. I got the fireplace going and settled into grandfather's chair with his journal. The entries started normally enough. Observations about wildlife, weather patterns, maintenance tasks. Then, 3 weeks before his disappearance, everything changed. They're coming through the walls now. I can hear them moving inside the logs. The symbols keep them contained, but they're getting stronger. They want a way out. They want a witness. I looked up from the journal, suddenly aware of how quiet it had become. No wind in the trees, no crackling fire, just complete silence. And in that silence, I heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from inside the walls. The sound moved, circling the room. I sat perfectly still, my grandfather's words echoing in my mind. The scratching grew louder, more deliberate. Then it stopped, directly behind my chair. I slowly turned around. The log wall behind me had changed. The wood grain had formed into a face. No, multiple faces, pressing against the surface as if trying to push through. They were distorted, mouths frozen in silent screams. I ran for the door, but the porch had disappeared. Where it should have been was just empty space, an infinite darkness that seemed to pulse with distant lights. The cabin had become an island in a void. The scratching returned, louder now, coming from every wall. The faces in the wood became more distinct. I recognized some of them, missing hikers from news reports over the years. And there, in the center, was my grandfather's face, his eyes wide with recognition. His lips moved, forming words I could somehow hear in my mind. They needed a witness. Now they have two. The walls began to bend inward, the faces pushing closer. That's when I noticed the symbols grandfather had carved. They weren't containing anything. They were invitation marks, drawn in specific patterns to let something in. I backed into the center of the room as the walls continued to curve. The faces were almost three-dimensional now, hands beginning to push through the wood grain. The floor shifted beneath my feet, and I realized it wasn't just the walls. The entire cabin was folding in on itself, like origami collapsing into a new shape. My grandfather's journal burst into flames on the table, and in its burning pages, I finally understood. This cabin wasn't just a building. It was a door, and for generations my family had been its keepers. The winter people weren't trying to get out. They were inviting us in. The last thing I saw before the walls closed in was my grandfather's face, now smiling. His voice echoed in my mind. "Welcome home, James. They've been waiting for you." I woke up 3 days later in my car, parked at the entrance to the dirt road. The cabin was gone, not destroyed, not burned down, just gone. In its place was a perfect circle of unmarked earth, as if nothing had ever been built there. The police report lists my grandfather as still missing. They never found the cabin either, though their records show it should be there. Sometimes I drive up that dirt road, but it always ends in empty forest now. But every winter, when the nights are longest, I see faces in the grain of my wooden furniture. I hear scratching in my walls, and sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I catch a glimpse of my grandfather standing behind me, smiling, waiting for me to accept my inheritance. After all, the winter people still need their witness. And now, so do I. I've tried to write this story down before, but the words always fade from the page. This time feels different. If you're reading this, it means they're ready for more witnesses. Check your walls tonight. Look closely at the wood grain. And if you see a face looking back, well, the winter people are always looking for company. Just remember, some inheritances are better left unclaimed. I never thought buying a house with a guest room would be my downfall. My realtor called it a bonus space. A small bedroom tucked away in the finished basement, perfect for visitors or a home office. For the first 6 months, it sat empty except for some old moving boxes. I didn't even think about it much until the noises started. It began with small things. The sound of drawers opening and closing when I was upstairs. Footsteps when I knew I was alone. I blamed it on the house settling, on my upstairs neighbors, on anything rational. But then I started noticing changes in the guest room. The boxes would be rearranged slightly. Not dramatically, just shifted a few inches from where I'd left them. I started taking pictures on my phone to prove to myself I wasn't imagining things. One morning, comparing photos, I couldn't deny it anymore. Someone was moving things in my house. I installed security cameras, made sure every window and door was locked, even got an alarm system. The cameras never showed anything, but the movements continued. Then I started finding other signs. A warm spot on the guest bed when I came home from work, steam on the bathroom mirror, food missing from my kitchen. One night, I heard humming coming from the guest room. A soft, gentle tune that seemed familiar, but I couldn't quite place. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, listening, my heart pounding. The humming stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of someone moving around. I called the police. They searched the entire house and found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of an intruder. They suggested I was stressed, that maybe I needed to talk to someone, but I knew what I'd heard. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked, a chair propped under the handle. I installed more cameras, motion sensors, everything I could think of. But nothing ever appeared on the footage, even though the signs of an intruder grew more obvious. Then I found the journal. It was sitting on the guest room bed one afternoon, a small leather-bound notebook I'd never seen before. Inside were entries dating back months, written in neat, precise handwriting. Day 47. She still hasn't noticed me living here. The space between the walls is tight, but I've made it comfortable. I can watch her through the vents when she sleeps. Day 89. Had to move quickly today when she came home early. Almost got caught. The crawl space under the stairs is getting cramped. Day 134. I think she's starting to suspect something. The cameras are annoying, but the blind spots are easy to navigate now. I've mapped her entire routine. The last entry was dated that day. It's time to say hello. I ran upstairs, called the police again, but this time I didn't wait for them. I got in my car and drove to a hotel.
The police searched the house again, more thoroughly this time. They found something that made my blood run cold. Behind the walls of the guest room, they discovered a network of narrow passages. Someone had been living inside my walls, watching me through carefully drilled holes hidden behind picture frames and furniture. They found a makeshift living space in the crawl space under the stairs, food wrappers, water bottles, even a small battery-powered fan. But they never found the person. I sold the house at a loss and moved into an apartment. I thought that would be the end of it. Then yesterday, I found a familiar leather notebook sitting on my kitchen counter. The latest entry reads, "New place is smaller, but the walls are thicker. More room to move around. Your humming helps me sleep at night." I'm writing this from a hotel room, trying to figure out what to do next. The police say there's no way anyone could have followed me, that my new apartment is secure. But I know better now. Because last night, as I was packing to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror. A face watching me from a vent in the ceiling. It smiled and pressed a finger to its lips, as if we were sharing a secret. The worst part? For a moment in that reflection, the face looked like mine. They say when you live alone long enough, you learn all the noises your house makes. But what if those noises aren't your house at all? What if there's someone learning all the noises you make? I don't live alone anymore. I haven't for a long time. I just didn't know it until now. And neither do you. Check your walls tonight. Listen carefully to those familiar creaks and groans. And if you hear humming coming from somewhere in your house, don't look for it. Because sometimes, the uninvited guests are the ones who never leave. And sometimes, they've been there so long, they think the house is theirs. I'm staying in this hotel tonight, but I know I can't hide forever. Because every time I close my eyes, I catch myself humming that familiar tune. The one I used to hear from the guest room. The one I'm starting to think I taught them.